will have access to private and personal information of people who are not affiliated with the institution. There's a strong likelihood, if not the certainty, of Hopkins electronic surveillance recording every move of anyone who sits on a porch, walks down the street, enters a home, visits a neighbor. In particular neighborhoods, Hopkins right now has 515 surveillance cameras on its campus. Some citizens will not want to call the police for assistance because they know that the person responding might be from Hopkins police. There will be increased resentment and distrust between many Baltimore citizens and Hopkins. Some police officers will be subject to the federal consent decree, while others, meaning the ones from Hopkins, even those responding to the same incident, will not be. We'll have consent decree officers and non-consent decree officers. But this is an extraordinary extension of Leopold to a private institution at a time when reasonable voices are calling for reform of Leopold. This is an extension of Leopold. And finally, I will say, well, this opens up Baltimore to the wrongdoing of private university police, just like what blew up at Tulane University last April. And you can just look it up online. Tulane University had the same kind of police force that Hopkins wants, with a shared jurisdiction around the campus. And this is all going to happen without the informed consent of those who are going to be subject to these police. There's no provision in this bill for informed consent. There's just a memorandum between the police commissioner, who does the mayor's bidding, and Hopkins. And the bill also allows for the mayor to simply ask the Hopkins police to police anywhere else in the city she likes. That's what's in the bill.
Just the first point I'll just respond to is the way the bill is set up, it would be that police would be on campus unless there's an MOU with DPD, just as you said. So that's the MOU was the opportunity for beyond the borders. And it's similar, set up a similar model to what the University of Maryland Baltimore, the way that's set up, where their campus police is authorized on the campus, and then with an MOU, they have extended a few blocks into the community around University of Maryland Baltimore, and a few of the other campuses as well.
But do we understand that this is about switching out 100 off-duty police officers for a group of people that we hire and train? There's nothing changing except that the 100 that we're hiring and training will be hired and trained, and not using 100 off-duty police officers that we use now. We do understand that we're not militarizing anything. We are simply switching. We can do nothing. Talk about options. We can do nothing, or we can switch out the 100 that are off-duty police officers now, relieve the Baltimore City Police Department of that strain.
Those are the only two options.
Yeah, the other option is, you know what the other option is?
I don't want to add fuel to the fire, but I want to stick a plug right there what Adam said earlier.
This legislation is bully personified. It's them trying to bully the community. I think part of that, what's missing from the conversation also that hasn't been brought up is the fact that a lot of employees at the hospital, 6% of them don't live in the city. So kind of like what Adam said, I think it's also protecting the hospitals and the corporation's interests. I just want to say we support, we do not support this bill as far as the nurses are concerned.
And one really quick point that's also worth noting that Michael Bloomberg came to Maryland and Annapolis. It's the same person who was the administrator when thousands of illegal stop and frisk arrests occurred in New York City.
By the way, 16,000, 34,000, 39,000 employees or residents.
That's 16,000.
16,000.
16,000 or 39,000.
Hopkins has 39,000 employees in the city, and 16,000 are residents.
Good evening. I want to commend you all for...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you just say that out of 39,000 employees, only 16,000 are residents?
Yeah, that's right. It's about a third.
I want to commend you all first for showing up and taking this verbal beating. This is not an easy thing to do. All right. I have two quick questions. One is, what was the strategy behind not developing the MOU prior to proposing the legislation? Because there's a lot of questions regarding what's going to be in that MOU, and it's kind of suspicious, to say the least, that it's a reference to the MOU in the actual bill, but no MOU. Listen.
And by the way, the low Hopkins local goal is to reach 40%. So there's a graduated goal objective. The process is modeled after the University of Maryland and Cochrane and Morgan's process. So the statute parallels the statute that already exists for those institutions. And so the way this works is that you get the statutory authority first, and then you enter into an agreement with the local police department to work out the logistics of it.
But I believe it was stated that the community would have input, right, into this MOU. But at that point, the community doesn't have as much power as far as input to the MOU because the legislation has already been passed. And I understand that you're saying that other universities did it this way, but this is the only private university that is trying to obtain this type of police bill.
I can only tell you that we're modeling it after the way the system works right now.
And then just had one other question. You keep referring to this 100 officers.
Yes.
So as Hopkins continues to grow and expand, which I lived in Leicester-Morton Court when I was younger, which is a block away from Hopkins, it continues to grow and expand both the university, it's over in Harvard East, it's at the hospital. Where do we get this 100-person figure? Because we can't possibly be expecting that as the university continues to grow and expand and rent properties and buy properties, that the police force isn't also going to grow and expand kind of unchecked. Because there's nothing in the legislation that's going to limit the growth or the size of this police force.
I can only tell you that the way the system, the way the university security system is structured right now, it is to switch out the off-duty police officers, the off-duty police officers that are currently being used. I tell you that is how the Vice President for Security envisions how she will structure her police department, is to switch out those officers with ones that we have hired and trained.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We had the pleasure of being seatmates to the Annapolis the other day. I have a quick question, something that kind of hasn't set right since the Annapolis hearing. I'm the father of 4 children. I live in the Garden Lakeside, a block away, campus over there. And my question is, could you articulate, Hopkins representative, if any reservations you all have with youth funding being tied to Hopkins deal? Because I think that, like, if you all are saying you want to be good partners with the community, what reservations do you have with youth funding being tied with the Hopkins police?
They don't have issues with that because it's not Hopkins money. Well, tax state.
That's my point, is that, like, if this is your goal to achieve a Hopkins police force, why do it in the back of Baltimore City children? Like, why wouldn't you say, hey, we don't want this bill this way. We don't want to achieve the goal this way. Why would you not? I mean, maybe you don't have reservations.
They didn't put, y'all didn't put that in there.
We put it in there because legislators.
Right, that's what I figured. You just being nice.
My point is, do you have reservations with the bill as it currently is written?
You know what, I don't, because I've been in hundreds of community meetings, and in each one of the community meetings, the community has said, address the root causes of crime. And so when the legislators suggested that they would be responsive to the community by putting in a program that requires PAL centers and cadet centers, that related to the relationship building kind of concept that we kept hearing over and over again. You can't have an adequate or effective police department unless you build relationships with the community. So sort of that cadet program fosters the notion of sort of nurturing future police officers in a cadet program in high schools and all the way through. That helps build relationships. That helps tie communities. So I wouldn't personally be opposed to cadet program or another PAL program. Madam Mayor, you had PAL programs, didn't you? Yeah. Again, PAL programs help put police officers in the community with youth. So, you know, there are always two ways to view something, and I appreciate that. But I saw it as an opportunity to just make some statements about root causes and addressing those. So if the legislators don't want it in there, you can take it out.
Yeah, I know I take issue with it because the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund was created by local government, and it was about 3% of property tax dollars from the coffers of property tax going to youth fund. And so my first time seeing that was when I saw the bill, and I was like, okay, so Hopkins is going to be putting in X amount of dollars for the youth fund, and it ended up being the state putting into the youth fund. And so it's all these line items that require the state to give money, but not Johns Hopkins to give money. And so at the end of the day, it's like, what are we really investing in, and what are you really saying is important? And what it feels like to me, from a person who has a very close connection to working on the youth fund, it feels like you're using children as political pawns and political pawns to actually advance your political agenda. And I know that it's not difficult to have a conversation of, well, if we're going to be doing this, then what do residents want? And it felt like when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this is just literally, we're going to plug this in here because we want children to have money, because we can use that in our talking points in our reports and in news reports. But it wasn't really a partnership. It was the state, requiring the state to give money, but not Johns Hopkins, a multi-billion-dollar institution that's trying to create a private business.
Well, the legislature.
Right. Yeah, if I could just add, you know, a lot of these programs were things we'll talk about in the community, and I would just say, for the Youth Works program. The Youth Works program, last summer, there were 11,000 kids that wanted to get jobs in the city in the summer. The city only had enough money for 8,000. So Hopkins doesn't get any money from the Youth Works program, but it's worked for the last 25 years. Hopkins has its own summer jobs program. It's the biggest one in the city, as Gene said earlier. Last summer they had 460 kids in the program for the summer, just in the Johns Hopkins program, and it's been over $1 million. It didn't meet the need, didn't meet the demand. The city doesn't have enough money to add more to that Youth Works program, and so the idea was, let's try to get some from the state, because the state has provided money for Youth Works in past years. One time, the year after Freddie Gray died. The next time, when it was an election year. So it just makes sense, it seems to us, and I think to a lot of people in the community we've met with, so look, if we're going to fund it, don't just fund it in an election year, fund it every year. So put it in the statute. So that's what I came from. Some of the other issues came from legislators, but for Youth Works, personally, I hope the state does keep funding that and put more money in every year, because it's a program that the city needs. Yeah, that's what we heard, and we support that.
All right. What I do want to say is, I want to say thank you to everyone coming out. Right now, we'll go ahead and ask everyone here to have a brief closing statement. What we'll go ahead and do is, I guess we'll start with the mayor, and then just come down this way. The defense normally speaks first, and the state would always speak last about their position. So we'll go ahead and do it that way. But this will be very brief, but most of all, I do want to say thank you, everybody, for coming out.
I also thank everybody for coming out, and for those who raised questions and concerns. I think it's important that this kind of dialogue take place. And let me just close by saying this. I'm not opposed to Hopkins having a police force, but I am opposed to Hopkins having a police force based on the current structure in this legislation. Secondly, based on a lot of issues that came up about Hopkins and the research, et cetera, that happens. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that if you don't have the kind of leadership in this city that puts the kind of demand on Hopkins, University of Maryland, you know, one of the things that I've learned over the years, and that's why I believe that many of the issues that we face are health related, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And until we recognize and realize that those things have to change internally as well as externally. So when you have a dirty city with vacant properties, when you have rats running around, when you are the #1 bed bug city in America, when you have great institutions and people are dying still of cancer and HIV and AIDS, and I can go on and on and on, that's where we have to have those individuals who we put in the public office to be that voice, so that the issues that you're talking to today about Hopkins and why they don't have a police force, you know, I agree. We have to restructure what's going on in Baltimore City and our police department. We have to look at where we're putting our resources so that we can prevent things from happening. We have to stop reacting to stuff and do more preventive. Preventive measures take time, but if we don't begin to do that, then we're going to be in the same situation talking about the same things, even if Hopkins gets their police force. So I just believe that, you know, we have to put the kind of demands on our leadership to work through the system, work with Hopkins, University of Maryland, and other institutions, so that the brains and the minds of individuals that go through that institution will help in collaborating and addressing some of the issues that we face. So that's my closing comment. You didn't give us a time for
So probably the best I can say is, you know, if any of the anecdotal sociological evidence about Baltimore City for the past 20 years gives us anything to understand, is that we do not need more police in Baltimore. Is there anything we need to reform our current police department, and we should not be granting a large private institution a law enforcement agency to have purview and enforcement over black people in Baltimore, because that just leads to more of the same problems that we've continuously been advocating against for the past 4 to 5 years. And if we're going to go back in time to 1999 with mass arrests, then that's what all Hopkins wants is a private force to be able to protect its interests and to have more white students enroll at the university, then that's what they want to do. But that's not going to solve any issue as it relates to violence in Baltimore. It's not going to really advance any real progressive agenda for Baltimore City black residents. And if Hopkins wants to support that, then they need to be in community with black people and grassroots institutions and ceding more resources and power over to people in the community if they really want to do that. And at the end of the day, it's a PR stunt to have more police officers at their institution to ultimately lead to more policing of black people. And that's just fact. So if we want to stop that, then Hopkins needs to not give us talking points and give us actual real solutions to some of the root causes that we've been talking about today.
As a former student and current grad worker, I do not consent to be framed as a vulnerable white woman to a fabricated black menace in Baltimore City. I do not consent to be framed as the reason for this force. I don't think it'll make me safer. Sexual assault's the #1 issue on campus, and this police force would not address it. I think we need to address root causes of crime. I think white supremacy is the menace, as Adam said before, not black Baltimoreans.
I just want to say thank you all for coming out and for the interest, and really appreciate the conversation and the calmness and so forth. So thank you.
I have no ability nor desire to get an applause. I can't speak as eloquently as Mayor Dixon has, and I'm considerably more level and calm in my analysis than some of the things I've heard. I just want to say that Johns Hopkins is an anchor institution. It is in Baltimore, it is with Baltimore, and it is for Baltimore. There is no way to separate us. We are all a part of this same community. So the health and the welfare of the community is as important to Hopkins as it is to each and every one of you, as it is to me as a lifelong member of Baltimore. So we cannot have an untenable situation as we have right now. Crime is out of control. There is the fear of an active shooter. So we must do something to fulfill the fiduciary responsibility that we have to the thousands and thousands of people who visit our beloved city every day. To do nothing is not an option. So we have a very contained proposal, and that is to switch out 100 off-duty police officers and put in a highly trained, appropriately disciplined group of people who will help us protect our citizens and our neighbors. We will do everything we can through this legislation to be transparent and to be held accountable. And our authority is conferred by the state and can be taken back by the state if we don't act appropriately. We will subject ourselves to as many community meetings as we can humanly possibly do in order to continue to get feedback from the community about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and we want to be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I just want to say just a few very short things. I'm a father of a 13-year-old whose grandparents live at 1616 East Village. Right around here. And my 13-year-old is in high school right now. She'll be in college, hopefully at a very good HBCU. Howard. And so I can appreciate the need of parents and neighbors to have safety for their children and grandparents and birth. Again, I'm also a person who's had a gun put in their face, very intimate experience, by a police officer, by campus police officers and others out of the Central District. And so I'm on both sides as far as the concern and understanding the concerns of both the prosecution and the defense. That being said, as a research institution, I'm no scientist, but I like to watch and listen to form a theory, and then to conduct an experiment where you gather data. You're supposed to collate that data, and then there's supposed to be action. You talk about a lot of programs that you've all instituted, but not about what happened after the program, after the data was collected. Baltimore has been this way for a long time. And you guys have been here for a long time. What have you done to impact this environment that you occupy space in? But we go right to the police. The same police that we put in place by legislation. And then the police show up and say that we're short-handed. We don't have enough resources. We can't do everything that's expected of us. So what are we doing before we go to the police? We're all neighbors in this space, and we all want this space to be better. I don't think anyone's here opposing anyone individually, but theoretically. And so hopefully we'll all work together to make Baltimore better, and we won't go to the ultimatum first, but it will be the ultimate response it has. With that, thank you everybody for coming out. If you're not joining the NAACP as a member, so you guys can sit up here and do this, and I can go home. There are a lot of issues. Please see Joshua Harris, our Vice President. He's working overtime. Dear Thomas working overtime. We're just regular people just like you. I don't even like these arrangements because they make people up here seem like something. We are you, and you are us. Please join us. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Sharing this last thing of the entire panel discussion, putting all these questions related to the Baltimore website. Again, thank you all for Membership of join NAACP Baltimore.org.
All right, see you soon. Yeah.